This is Thumbing Through the Archives, a weekly radio show and podcast focusing on Michigan history, airing every Wednesday night from 5:30 to 7 p.m. on WMIC 660 AM and 95.3 FM. Also streaming in podcast form at our website, senlacbroadcasting.com. Now your hosts, Mike Gallagher, Nick Lean, and Erica Frisbee.
So, welcome once again, everybody, to another episode of Thumbing Through the Archives, the podcast about the history, mystery, and curiosities in Michigan. I'm Erica Frisbee. I am the St. Lac Broadcasting News Director, and with me, per usual...
Mike, you go first this time.
Okay.
No, don't do this to me. Don't throw me off.
I am Mike Gallagher. Now I'm thrown off, actually. I'm Mike Gallagher from the St. Lac County News.
And I'm Nick Lean. I'm the assistant manager at St. Lac Broadcasting, and that's the most exciting thing that's happened to me all week.
Wow.
Switching it up.
I was going to say, why did you do this to us? Spooky thing that isn't completely spooky for the regular spooky reasons, but spooky because of adulthood. We unfortunately will be taking a short break from the podcast until the end of the election cycle.
That's very spooky.
It is very spooky.
Yeah, we might not come back at all.
No.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Oh.
Don't say that. I need the election cycle to end.
Yeah.
Just for my own sanity and also for the workload that, as Nick can attest, I've been running in and out of his office like throughout the last week and a half, being like, do we have this? Do we need this? Mm-hmm. And it's usually about like candidates, proposals, millages, really, really exciting, jaw-dropping stuff.
There actually, locally there is some pretty important elections coming. I mean, obviously the general election as well with the presidency, but
we're more focused on the local stuff. That's our bread and butter.
Yeah.
I'm actually very excited for this episode.
A bit of me is like, I was excited, but then I just kept getting mad at the subject, so I may have to revisit a couple of things to do with this guy later on, because some of the things just didn't end up in the script like I planned on them being. That being said, what would make you give up your money, your morals, your reputation, your own self-worth? For one, David Dean, the answer seemed to be, simply put, cocaine. However, I think it went deeper than that. Ultimately, what makes David Dean worthy of an episode is how he manipulated his way through and perhaps even thrived during St. Clair County's war on drugs while playing both attorney and criminal, often in unequal measure. So as we discussed last two episodes, we're very firmly in the 1970s to 1990s timeframe for St. Clair County. So we already know what world he is starting his practice in. That being said, what do you guys know about David Dean? I know at least one of you knows a lot more than the other.
Yeah, I know Nick knows quite a bit. I kind of just picked up on what you guys have discussed about him off air. I know he's been involved in some pretty high-profile cases, but I don't really know anything about his backstory or really much about him at all.
So we should back up and tell our listeners David Dean was an attorney.
Yes.
From St. Clair County.
Yes.
What do I know about David Dean?
What don't you know?
I know quite a bit about him. I know there's going to be a lot of things that I did not know that you've uncovered, and a lot of connecting of the dots. I know that he was a high-profile defense attorney from St. Clair County in the 1980s who was also a business owner and ran a bar. And like Mike said, was involved in some high-profile cases. My experience or knowledge of David Dean came about during the Temujin Kinsu / Scott Macklem case from 1986.
1980, yeah,
1980 was the murder. The case was 86 or 86 to 87.
Yeah.
He was the defense attorney during that time for the accused. So that was, where I've read about him the most, was just kind of studying that case. And I know that there's been some instances that I'm sure you're going to talk about, Erica, where he lost his ability to practice law. He was accused of some pretty serious stuff. There was a case where the verdict was just thrown out because of his actions while he was a defense attorney. So that's what I know about him.
That is the one difficult thing about David Dean. and doing an episode on him specifically, is trying to figure out which cases go in the episode and which get their own episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for instance, I ended up not covering the Jason Ruiz case in the script. I had planned to, because David Dean was related in a way that we will talk about when we cover that case down the road. But at the same time, it was just going to drag the story down instead of actually help you guys understand / see David for just David. Because there's just a lot of details in the Ruiz case that it's easy to get lost in the Ruiz case. And the Ruiz case deserved to have its Pichet episode, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm not as happy with the script as I wish I was. I'm just going to say that right now. So feel free, if there's anything that I'm missing, Nick, to jump in and add.
Okay.
Because there's going to be some things that, yes, I uncovered / connected the dots on it. Then there's going to be some things where I may have just completely forgotten to add it into the script. Sorry, I basically just went over what I wrote down in the next paragraph, but this episode will be a bit different in that I will be covering / touching on several important cases that Dean was a part of. It is by no means an exhaustive account. If I were to present every damning piece of evidence I could find on him, we would be here for far too long. Perhaps we'll revisit Mr. Dean in the future and delve into his other cases, but for today, we will be focusing on one where he was the attorney and one where he was a criminal. David Michael Dean, our episode's protagonist, as it were, was born November 15th, 1946, to parents Gerald and Drusilla Sally Dean in Port Huron. He was their second child, born about a year and a half after the couple's wedding. If my math and genealogy findings are correct, Drusilla was 18 and had given birth to David's older sister, Geraldine, a month before the wedding in 1945. You know, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. No judgment.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when David was born, things were already kind of hectic / volatile in his corner of the world. So by the time David was born, his mother had filed for divorce twice that year. She filed for it in May, apparently changed her mind, and then filed for it again in July, changed her mind, and then he was born in November. And both times that she filed, she was citing excessive cruelty, which, again, for her to have taken both of those filings back and then stay with him for a little bit longer, it was A, surprising, and B, makes me wonder what exactly was going on in the household at the time.
It's like textbook signs of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Manipulation.
Yeah. They did appear to, quote unquote, reconcile for a time, going on to have David's younger sister, Sherry, in 1950. While it wasn't clear how turbulent the home was or wasn't due to the relationship, it is clear that enough was enough in 1954 when Drusilla filed for and was granted a divorce from Gerald, receiving custody of the children and $30, or about $350 now, a week in child support. David was 7 at the time of the divorce, and before 1954 was done, it appears that Drusilla had remarried. Her new husband's name was Gerald. Also, her old husband's name was Gerald. Her new husband's name was Gerald Zimmer this time, though. And
extremely common name for the time.
Yes, but also at the same time, it's like, she knows what she likes, I guess. And it's Gerald's.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. This Gerald was a machine operator at Mueller Brass Company in Port Huron. He worked there for like 40 years. So by the time David and Jerry were enrolled at Port Huron High School by the early 1960s, Drusilla had welcomed 2 more daughters with Zimmer, and the family seemed to be a solid supportive unit. David graduated high school in 1964 and seemingly took the term gap year too seriously because he seemed to drop out of records from high school graduation until enrollment in SC4. Like, not even any social, and again, we know that he could have popped up in records because there's the different records of so-and-so went to the beach with such and such this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he didn't pop up whatsoever. He just kind of seemed to be flying under the radar for those years.
You said 64 he graduated?
64, and then he started college in 67.
Okay.
I am going to guess that part of the gap year was spent courting his first wife, Sue Mosier, who he married in 1968. After graduating in 1969, David continued to pursue a Bachelor in Arts for Elementary Education at Michigan State University, graduating in 1971. Prior to finishing his degree, and probably as part of student teaching, David taught 5th grade/middle school at Fillmore Elementary School in Port Huron, continuing in the position until he transferred to Garfield International School. However, he and his family, which had grown in 1971 with the birth of his son Troy, they moved to Germany in 1973 so as to allow David to teach at the Nuremberg American Elementary School with the U.S. Army, while Sue would work as a nurse.
Did he speak German?
Apparently so.
Well enough to survive in Germany?
I'm pretty sure that the U.S. base, like, he probably would have been teaching, like, servicemen's kids. So I don't think he would have had to know German all that much, other than, like...
Be out and about, and he knew it well enough, probably, to survive in town.
Curious as to, like, if it was the moving or if it was the language barrier or what it was, but it's not clear what happened in Germany, but whatever it was, it apparently prompted Sue to divorce David in 1974. So, like, within a year or so of going to Germany, she was back in the States with Troy, and he finished out teaching at the Army base until 1976. David divorced in 1974. He was ordered to pay $28 or about $190 a week in support for his son Troy. Still, David continued on teaching in Germany until 1976 when he returned to the States and entered law school at the Cooley Law School in Lansing. He apparently thrived, becoming the first Cooley student to represent the school at a national competition when he was one of 11 regional winners to compete at the American Bar Association's National Client Counseling Competition. I found this especially ironic considering where he would drop the ball later on as a lawyer. So essentially, the client counseling competition is making sure / seeing how good law students are with talking to their clients and getting the information that they need and formulating the defense.
This was when he was at Cooley?
Yeah, he was award certified with the American Bar Association via this competition. And as this is definitely foreshadowing / like a spoiler, he messes up with the client counseling portion of things later on.
Knowing what we know, I would say big time.
Yes. Yeah. And Mike and the listeners will find that out soon enough.
But for the people that don't know, at this point in his career, you could say that he's a pretty...
Oh, yeah. At this point in time, he's doing really good. Like, he's...
winning awards.
Winning awards. He's interning at a fancy Lansing law office. If anything, people were surprised that he came back to St. Clair County for law stuff, but then it made sense because basically as soon as he graduated, they got him into the prosecutor's office in St. Clair County.
I happen to have his obituary here in front of me because I had a file on David Dean from some of my research in an unrelated case, and it says that it was the first time Cooley Law ever competed in a national competition.
Yeah.
So he was
the
first student to do that.
It's a little bit funny because of the fact that every family has their little white lies and everything like that, and there's a couple of things where his obit doesn't quite match some of the things that are in the news. And that's partially because of the fact that I think they wanted to pretend that Jerry was not born out of wedlock.
Oh, I see.
I think those were probably some white lies that they would have gotten away with if it weren't for those meddling kids. Erica looking up information about him.
I'm not the meddling kid. Shush. It was Nick first.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would have put 2 and 2 together that Jerry was born out of wedlock, but...
But what we know for sure is that he was winning awards for his law school performance, and that he was so highly lauded that he was immediately kind of just like plopped into the St. Clair County prosecutor's office under, well, technically he would have started under Peter Deegan because that's 1979. And then like, so yeah, it would have technically been probably under Deegan at first that
he was brought in.
Yeah,
but he did work as assistant prosecutor under Bob Cleland.
Almost primarily, if not solely, under Bob Cleland, because Peter Deegan very quickly left the prosecutor role. We actually talked about this in the Ham episode.
I was going to say, we need that map. That'd be very helpful for this exact conversation.
Nick, you can definitely attest to this, as you noted in your introduction of David Dean. Relatively quickly, while he was at the prosecutor's office, he was handling high-profile cases.
Yeah.
Like, I was kind of surprised by how quickly he was put on, like, he was literally put on, like, a murder-suicide case, like, on his first or second go.
With no private law experience.
Right, just law school.
Yep. But, that being said, he was, by all intents and purposes, like a star student. So, he probably had a very good resume for someone up to that point in their career.
And he continued building on that resume because, of course, there were some things where, like, they would have to do the plea deals or they would end up losing. Needless to say, no matter the result, and usually they would win with David Dean on their side, but usually no matter the results, David Dean was like a star performer, a star attorney, and very quickly, even as a prosecutor assistant, was becoming known as one of the lawyers in St. Clair County.
Like a hot shot.
Yeah, his success seemed to quadruple over the years. A year after joining the prosecutor's office, he was buying a law office with 2 other area lawyers. A year after that, he was considering running for district judge. Like, people technically asked him, like, sought him out and was like, "Are you going to run?"
And he's in, what, like his early 30s at this point?
Early 30s, and again, like, literally 2 years after joining the prosecutor's office. He has 2 years of experience under his belt insofar of actual law. And people are like, you should run for district judge.
I think this is a case, we always kind of talk about the, oligarchy in St. Clair County legal community and how it's a lot of the same families and whatnot. But this is a case of someone who did not have family.
No.
Who was established as, a judge or prosecutor.
Yeah, the fact that anybody actually considered him even for a second as a candidate when there were people like William Ham, R. Gerald Barr, like the Clelands.
I think that speaks volume to his ability to practice law.
100%.
He's probably good at what he did.
100%, because, his name was showing up, like, in the same sentence as, like, some of the people who would go on to be judges. Like, they had so many more years of law under their belt by that point that it was, again, surprising that he was able to be on equal footing with them.
Mm-hmm.
So 1982, he didn't end up running for district judge because I think he was like, I only have 2 years at the prosecutor's office. I don't think I'm qualified. In 1983, he had remarried, and by all accounts, things were going well. But despite his varied and successful time at the prosecutor's office, within 4 years of joining, Dean was striking it out on his own, both with a private practice as a defense attorney, but also as a restaurant owner, opening the Keg and Kraut restaurant in 1984 at 515 Wall Street, where his office was. So, how well do you understand that office building?
I know it was a bar/restaurant, and his law office was on top of it, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it was across the street from the courthouse?
I believe so. If not across the street, it was like kitty corner, like within walking distance in the same like square block.
Yeah.
If you look at it, I can see the map in my head. So.
I hate it when that happens. But yeah, no.
And this is in Port Huron?
Yep.
So he's simultaneously running a bar and grill.
That caters very conveniently to people who work at the courthouse.
Yeah.
Right. Like in the 90s, we had the Courthouse Cafe in Sandusky where Bob and Jamie's is now. It's the same kind of thing. It's like where they would go for their lunch. But what I was saying, though, David Dean was simultaneously running Cake and Kraut, which was a bar and grill, also practicing law in a law office on top of the bar and grill. And then was he simultaneously working at the prosecutor's office as assistant prosecutor, or at this point is he just private?
By the time he has Keg and Kraut, he is away from the prosecutor's office.
This might be a stupid question, but can you simultaneously run a private practice and be like an employee of the prosecutor's office?
I don't think in the 1980s, at least.
Yeah.
Because like in the 1970s, again, going back to the William Hamm episode.
Yeah, that was like...
It was technically kind of like...
It wasn't illegal, but it was like, hey, this looks bad kind of thing.
Yeah. It was fine, but also you would get weird looks for it. And basically by the time like the 1980s, 1990s rolled in, like, I don't know if there was an official rule saying like you can't double dip, but I'm pretty sure that by that point, that's part of the reason why Dean went for the restaurant rather than...
Yeah.
I think that kind of speaks to the point that he was a very good lawyer, too, because he was able to play both sides of it.
Yeah, 100%.
I feel like that would be incredibly hard to do.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. There are definitely moments where the prosecutor comes back out when he's being a defender.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And
yeah,
to the...
would have to.
Well...
To his detriment.
To his detriment.
Okay.
Because sometimes...
So, like, he would accidentally, like, prosecute his own clients sometimes.
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get
Oh,
there.
I was going to say he just, during like his cross-examination and some of the transcripts I've read, he comes across as a prosecutor. Like
Right.
just
Yes,
his
that
way
too.
that he questions. And,
Right.
Yeah. Again, we're getting ahead of ourselves because we'll later go into his trial technique very minutely.
Real quick, this part is not important at all, but the building that was like the office and the restaurant, would that have been like what the lamplighter or whatever that was? Where they had the restaurant on the top floor.
Would it have been that building?
Yeah.
What was
Again,
the-
it doesn't matter.
What was the
but
address?
515 Wall Street.
All right.
I was going to say
We'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
somebody...
I can't
who-
remember. I believe it was the lamplighter, and then they reopened it recently as something else, and then
That would be wild, though.
yeah,
Because, like, speaking of...
it was a cool place.
Speaking of reopenings, Keg and Kraut ended up being reopened as Wall Street Exchange.
But that does look like a cool building. So again, another question that doesn't really matter, but was he doing all right as a restaurant owner as well? Like, was he excelling in all aspects, kind of, or not?
It seems like, if not excelling, he was definitely coasting.
Yeah.
It seems like from my research that he would have, if he didn't have the problems that Erica's going to get into, he would have been fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it seems like a good business model,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
right next to the courthouse and having his other business in the same building.
I think with the restaurant stuff, I think his saving grace was the fact that there was another co-owner. Because if there had not been a co-owner for the restaurant, that would have tanked super fast when the problems began.
Okay.
So 1986 is when the Keg and Kraut became the Wall Street Exchange. And by 1986, Dean had pulled off his biggest defense yet, that of 20-year-old John M. Koob, who had been charged with first-degree murder in the death of 22-year-old Sandra Jean Evans. Koob claimed that Evans, who was allegedly a local sex worker, had given him an STD, prompting his rage and her death. Thanks to Dean's defense, though, Koob was charged with voluntary manslaughter, which meant he'd face up to 15 years in prison rather than life in prison without parole. Following the verdict, a Times-Herald reporter recounted how Dean returned to the bar across the street from the courthouse, but had a ginger ale for his celebration drink instead of a beer. "This sure tastes good, but not as good as today's verdict," he grinned over the glass's rim, perfectly depicting false sobriety as, by the time Koob's trial went to the jury, Dean was 3 years deep in a cocaine habit. And as Dean fell down that rabbit hole, he was about to drag at least one of his clients down with him, and no one seemed keen to stop him.
I have so many comments. So at this point, you said he was 3 years into his addiction, but he didn't drink or anything. So
supposedly
in public.
Oh, okay. I see. I also like the writing style of the Times Herald there, as he was grinning over the rim of his glass. I like that. And then
that's John F. Brown for you.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And then
get out of here.
It's like Eric Levine style.
He really paints a picture. But then, and maybe you're going to get into this more, I'm just curious what possibly his defense could have been for that murder charge.
It was literally that it was a crime of passion. That was their whole defense for Koob, at least.
Yeah.
So not premeditated.
Not premeditated.
Okay.
That's all that they were really intent on proving, that it wasn't premeditated.
Okay.
Even though again, the Koob trial is one of those things where even if Dean wasn't involved, it is a messed up enough story where I would have considered covering it / was considering covering it before I found out that David Dean was representing Koob.
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated, but long story short, Sandra Jean Evans did not deserve to die.
Right.
Especially because she may or may not have actually given him that STD.
Right.
So that's the end of at least part one. Any more comments before
I figured you were kind of leading into a break, but I just had those couple of questions before we...
No, it's completely fair.
Yeah. I also noticed that you said that was in 1986. Is that kind of leading us into what Nick was talking about earlier? Or
a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. I do technically name drop his guy.
Yeah. Because again, that one needs its own series, really.
Which one?
Oh, Temujin Kensu.
Yeah. Frederick Freeman.
Yeah. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen.
It will happen.
It's in the works.
Yep.
This sure tastes good quote. I wanted to reach through the page and smack David Dean back in 1986 just because, like...
You know, he thought about that for a while.
Oh, no, like 100%. Like, you can tell that he was like... He probably was like walking from the courthouse to the bar with that zinger in mind, like, oh, this is going to be so good. John F. Brown's going to have a heyday with it. And John did. John enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Sorry, listeners, if you could see the look on Mike's face right now. He is very pleased with John F. Brown's work, it seems.
I mean, it's a good line. You got to give him that.
I do, yeah.
It's pretty corny, but, you know.
It evokes an image in your head.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And, you know, it's probably not factually correct, unfortunately, because ginger ale tastes pretty good. I think it would taste better than a verdict. Yeah.
You think it would taste better than a verdict?
You can't really taste a verdict, but good stuff.
Good stuff.
We need that type of journalism.
We'll get on it then.
Yeah.
And on that note, we'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Hour number 2 of Thumbing Through the Archives coming up right after your top of the hour news and weather right here on WMIC 660 AM and 95.3 FM.
And we are back. So, though Dean would later tell the Times Herald that his cocaine habit began in 1983, particularly when he left the prosecutor's office and went into private practice, there were only a few public hints of it if you didn't know David personally. For instance, in 1985, Dean was caught in Ohio with cocaine, being arrested for possession and indicted by a grand jury, but he was ultimately left off the hook after he agreed to plead deal with ordered treatment. So he essentially was like, yeah, I'll do the treatment, I'll go to the counseling, and the Ohio grand jury was like, okay, then we'll just throw this out.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, again, David Dean was caught with cocaine in Put-in Bay, Ohio in 1985 prior to a lot of the cases
yes
that he had argued.
Don't you have like the arrest or like You definitely have like the
I have it
court
in here somewhere. Yeah.
Mike, if you want to look at some of this stuff, because it's wild.
I just have a question, and maybe you're going to get to it, but why was he telling the Times-Herald about his cocaine addiction?
When he was telling the Times-Herald about his cocaine addiction, it was in 1993, and it was after he had basically been outed for having the cocaine addiction.
Okay. So he was basically just telling his side of the story to the Times-Herald?
Yeah.
Okay.
But once that offense in 1985 was out of sight and out of mind, Dean continued to take cases, including the 1987 extradition of John O'Boyle, who we discussed in last episode, who was a drug dealer.
Cocaine.
Although a bit of me is like,
Actually.
very true. Like, don't get me wrong. A bit of me is like, I feel John O'Boyle probably would have supplied Dean, but at the same time, with the amount that O'Boyle was shipping and also the way that he was shipping it in, I don't know if he actually would have, if he himself would have been the point person for Dean.
Probably not.
Because he would be more like the wholesaler.
He would have been higher up, yeah.
Also, can you imagine just being able to purchase wholesale cocaine?
It's a different time.
Costco.
Yeah.
The Costco of cocaine's John O'Boyle.
I'm sorry, but I'm just picturing when he was telling the Times-Herald that he had a cocaine addiction, that he used the same quote as the other story.
This sure
tastes good.
But not as good as that. Oh, man. So, 1987, not only is he helping with the John O'Boyle extradition case, but like in the newspaper, the coverage, literally right next to the John O'Boyle stuff, you'll find David Dean's name again because he is defending Fred Freeman at this time. And
so two very, very high-profile cases at the time.
At the time. And like, again, that was just a normal day for him.
Right.
Like, literally, he was just going back and forth between courtrooms for that week.
And those probably weren't the only cases he was working.
Nope.
Probably just the two.
Most pressing, most public.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think it's worth mentioning, too, that he's doing these high-profile cases, but it's almost the impression that I got kind of reading into some of these cases is it had like gone to his head, and he wasn't, at least on paper, it doesn't look like he was doing much of his own due diligence to research these cases. He had his assistant, I don't know if you're going to get into that, but he had his assistant kind of doing a lot of the investigation, the interviewing the clients, gathering information for him, and then he would just go to court and essentially parrot what she had given him.
Yeah.
So it's not, at this point, it seems like maybe he was so far gone in his drug habit that he wasn't effective at lawyering.
So he's
beyond just arguing in a courtroom.
He's basically just surviving off of reputation at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with a gun to his head assessment just because of the fact that if he's coasting off a reputation, you got to keep accepting those high profile cases to keep that reputation. Even if you lose those cases, you still got that reputation. So there are some points where, like, definitely, yes, I could see gun to his head. For instance, he told the courts, like, don't assign me any more drug cases. And privately, it was because of the fact that he was like, I don't want to have somebody who I bought from ratting me out, which we'll get to that in a second. Throughout the John O'Boyle and Fred Freeman defenses, as well as the subsequent defenses in 1987, 1988, 1989, so on and so forth, cocaine use was full force and had also transferred into some crack use.
Verifiably so, I would like to add.
Yeah. So according to legal affidavits, witnesses attested as seeing or even selling cocaine and crack to David Dean, with Dean seen buying crack from 1986 to 1987 in South Park. South Park may sound familiar in part because we talked about it last episode, because it was one of the areas that was so heavily afflicted by gang violence. There were literally children who couldn't play outside. And it's partially because the legal elite in St. Clair County wanted to get their nose candy. Like, that made me so mad to kind of put that together.
Big contributing factor.
So, congrats, David Dean. You actually probably ruined some people's childhood because you happened to decide to go and buy drugs on a certain day.
Yeah.
So, the drug use caught up with him in various ways, but most commonly, honestly, this may just sound like I'm parodying a lot of what Nick just said, but he was underprepared, if not wholly unprepared, for trials he was the lead defense on. The lack of preparedness came from a lot of different factors, but notably, by 1989, Dean was avoiding cases involving drug offenses for fear of having a dealer snitch on him, and just generally avoiding clients as much as he could. So even if he did have a client, he would try and not speak to them until like he absolutely had to, which unfortunately led to him usually talking to his clients for the very first time in court.
Yeah. At this point, did he still work for the prosecutor's office?
He did not. He
Okay.
was only private practice in the restaurant.
Okay.
That being said, because he used to work for the prosecutor's office and literally, like, remember how I said Deegan was who hired him in? Deegan was by this point a judge as well that Dean was practicing in front of.
Mm-hmm.
So there were several times where he caught the private investigator, the legal secretary, doing Dean's stuff for him and pulled him aside and was like, this can't keep happening.
Right.
But instead of actually, you know, taking responsibility, doing his own darn job and telling his secretary, like, hey, I got this, he just told her to be more careful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was going to say, too, you know, he's also arguing cases against his former boss. So not only is he arguing in front of Deegan, who got him the gig initially, he's arguing against Bob Cleland, who would have been the prosecutor when he was assistant prosecutor. And as prosecutor, while Dean is in private practice as a defense attorney. Are you also going to get on the John Bounds at all?
No.
Just like as an example of the, as Erica would say, like the incestuous relationship between like legal communities in St. Clair County. David Dean, while he was the defense attorney for Fred Freeman's trial, the lead investigator during that case was a police detective named John Bounds, who a few years prior had been busted in an illegal gambling ring in Port Huron. He was supposed to be undercover, like breaking up these gambling rings at motels in Port Huron, and instead was just like taking part in it and gambling. David Dean was his defense attorney for that and got him his job back with the police department.
Okay. And then he ended up being the lead detective in the Fred Freeman case.
Who David Dean was the defense attorney for.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's just stuff like that.
Yeah. And honestly, because of the gambling case and a few other things, Bounds could get his own episode and probably will.
He should.
Yeah.
Which is part of the reason why I did not. I'm glad that you're here to fill in those gaps, because I wasn't able to go fully into Bounds because
it just is an example of like.
I was going to say we would be here all day.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder too, like how many of those there are that we just don't know about.
I definitely considered trying to find out how to go through all of Dean's cases, like even if that meant that I had to go and like scroll through every single case in the St. Clair County like archives. Like that's how mad the script was driving me, honestly, because Dean is just he had his hand in everything, and if not his hand, then he was protecting a hand that was in something.
He's like Saul Goodman.
So speaking of that private investigator, let us put a name and a face to that descriptor. Janice Barnum, who...
She's the one that's putting together all the work and all the casework and all the legwork for Dean at this point.
Yeah. So David Dean, as a student teacher, was teaching at Fillmore Elementary, and he met 12-year-old Janice Yarborough. He was like 23 while she was 12. And she kind of came back into his orbit when he represented her son in a case. And there was a couple of times where on the stand, while giving testimony, the prosecutor, all he asked was, "Do you care about Mr. Dean?" And she was like, "As in romantically? No, we're not like that." And he was like, "I never said."
That's not what they asked. But just for context, was she qualified for this position? And it sounds like she was at least pretty good at it.
She was good at it.
Yeah.
Yes and no. So
because it sounds like the stuff she was being asked to do wouldn't technically be in her job description.
It's one of those things where she wanted to become a lawyer. So this was like her realm of interest. She went to SE4 for like criminal justice and a related minor. So she had the basis of the knowledge. And also having worked in a law office, I can attest that you will learn a lot. Like, that's part of the reason why I'm able to decipher any law stuff, is because I worked in a law office. So she was good at what she did, but she was not on paper qualified to do it.
Right.
Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes.
So Janice was qualified in what she needed to do, but again, she wasn't supposed to be doing it. She definitely did not have the... Legally speaking, she definitely should not have been doing it.
Okay.
If people were actually on top of things, / not just pulling people aside and warning them, but actually reporting them, Dean and Janice probably both would have been in major trouble.
Okay.
But unfortunately, that is not what happened. It just, things were trouble for other people. For instance, it's unclear how many cases of Dean's were handled by Janice. Like, we have no idea how many cases are technically Dean's after a certain point.
Right.
Well, because he himself said his addiction started in 1983. So you could assume anything that far back.
Yeah.
At least 85 is when it's on paper, with the Ohio bust.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then...
Does he ever get into, like, how he got into that drug addiction? Or
essentially, he says that he basically chalks it up to peer pressure. Lots of lawyers were doing it.
Okay.
People at a party, so on and so forth. It was the times.
Yeah, because we've obviously said on previous episodes that it was a pretty big problem in Port Huron at the time as well.
Yeah, it was like a social drug. It was instead of
it's a white collar.
Instead of passing a joint, they would pass the spoon.
Yeah.
But yeah, so do not know how many of Dean's cases were actually Dean's and how many could technically be chalked up to Barnum. But we do know at least one case was basically Barnum's, that of Randy Overton, who was accused of murder in the death of his friend Dennis John Pastor Jr. So remember your case from Snover?
Yes.
Similar kind of vibes. Two guys get completely zonked out on crack. Skirmish happens. Only one is alive to tell the tale. Remind me, did your perpetrator take the car and like stuff and run, or?
Yes. He put the body in the car and then kind of drove around with it for a while, trying to decide what to do with it.
I forgot about that part.
Yeah, I believe it was him and his father.
I remember the dad being involved.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so not quite to that degree, but definitely stole the car. And, well, let me just back up a little bit. So whether or not Overton did the crime is not the question. Overton would tell you himself, as he told his own mother, that he killed Pastor, but not out of hate or anger, but out of self-defense while strung out on crack cocaine and sleep deprivation. The question was whether or not David Dean provided adequate representation, and the answer is apparently an empathetic no. So, Randy Overton was 29 years old when he was arrested and arraigned in July 1989, several weeks after he and his roommate, 28-year-old Pastor, had gotten into a fight. Overton had only been living with Pastor for 4 days at the time of the fight, 3 of those days having been spent with no sleep because they were basically on a binge. So
bad combination.
It's a bad time. And according to Overton, when the incident happened, the two had recently smoked crack, and he had been working on his car when Pastor approached him aggressively. Overton defended himself, which led the men to struggle with Pastor's gun. While Overton attested that it just went off by accident and that he was acting in self-defense, the prosecution, as led by one Kenneth Lord, insisted he killed his roommate for the car and other items in the home to fund his crack habit. After all, Overton had been arrested in Detroit, having taken and sold Pastor's 1987 black Camaro for about $3,500, or about $9,110 now, as well as stealing the TV, stereo, and a 12-gauge shotgun, which he also sold. Whereas previous cases we've looked into have taken much longer, the Overton case was done within 5 to 6 months, with Overton found guilty of first-degree murder. That abridged timeline, as well as the lack of newspaper coverage on the case, was one of the first things that told me that something wasn't right about the defense. While not all court cases are covered, for one of Dean's cases to wrap up so quickly but without a plea agreement is odd. In general, it appears that Dean would not go for plea agreements when he thought there was glory to be had. However, glory comes from actual work, and by 1989, fellow lawyers and even judges were noticing and scolding Dean for having his private investigator do lawyer-only tasks for him. This was revealed in part via an appeal in 1991, wherein Overton was seeking a second trial on the basis that Dean had been insufficient in his counsel. And why was he insufficient? Because of cocaine. This was not news to anyone by this point. Just the year before the 1991 appeal, Dean had been called out by a client in a murder case, with said client, James Allen Gibson, telling the court he had sold drugs to Dean. So remember how I said, like, he wanted to avoid the drug cases for that reason? Whoops.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Completely forgot they also could murder people and do other stuff.
Right. And anybody could snitch on him at any time.
Literally.
Yeah.
Dean was able to withdraw from the case, claiming that the 21-year-old was just trying to set up an appeal for himself, so he was technically able to walk away with his reputation intact. However, that would do nothing to help him nor his reputation when Overton's appeal hearing came in September 1991. Though Dean did not attend, it was a damning indictment on his performance nonetheless. One expert described the performance as scattershot, at best, with Dean initially arguing for self-defense and then for manslaughter over the course of the trial, before essentially telling the jury that Overton had committed murder, as manslaughter was a variety of murder.
That to me is just like so textbook that he's just like jumping all over the place.
Yeah. That and
just like high as a kite.
High as a kite and kind of falling back into the whole prosecution mind.
Yeah.
Because like this is where I was like...
He's like reverting to that.
Yeah. Because you don't... Who describe... Like if you're a defense lawyer, you wouldn't describe self-defense or manslaughter as a variety of murder.
Right.
You would try not to describe it as a murder in general. And yet, it's a variety of murder.
It was like it was a bullet point he had tucked away from his assistant prosecutor days that found its way out.
Exactly. Worse yet, the prosecution had offered a plea deal, but Dean never informed Overton of the plea. Now, they did go back and forth later on because Dean was trying to say, no, I did. But essentially, at the end of the day, it all boiled down to if Overton was aware of the plea, he was only aware of it because Dean said they weren't going to take it.
Okay. Now, if a lawyer doesn't inform their client of a potential plea deal, would that be grounds for a mistrial?
Maybe not a mistrial, but definitely an appeal.
Okay.
Because essentially, like, you don't have the full picture, so you cannot give yourself a full defense.
Right.
And because of that, and more bits and pieces like that.
I think that aside, too, there's other things that play into the ineffective counsel other than just him not making that obvious to Overton.
That being said, it was one of the most basic ways he failed as counsel.
Yep.
And again, going back to his award on client counseling, he won an award. He was the first person from Cooley Law School to basically show them how it's done. And yet, he can't even bring himself to talk to his client.
Right.
Not only did they ignore the plea deal, Dean ignored the plea deal, while the prosecution called for outside witnesses, Dean did not, deciding to rely only on Overton's testimony. This was a bad idea, in part because Overton changed the story 6 times. He was under the influence and basically sleep inebriated, so he was mentally affected on 2 different fronts. And at the very least, a forensic psychiatrist would have been helpful in, if not parsing out which of the 6 stories is the correct one, then at least helping the jury understand how your faculties could be so diminished because of sleep deprivation and cocaine use.
Yep.
Jan had looked into getting a psychiatric examiner. Even the psychiatric examiner that they had for the appeal was the one that she was going to contact, but either because he was unavailable or Dean didn't want to pay the fee, the doctor was not contacted. It was also further found, this kind of goes hand in hand with the plea deal thing again, but it was further found that Dean himself did not attempt to look into a possible plea or other avenue for his client at all, such as pleading to second-degree murder, which would have given Overton the chance at parole after 15 years, like with Koob. Mm-hmm. This would have been a slam dunk case for him. This could have been another Koob trial for him if he did the same thing that he did with Koob.
The Overton?
Yeah. But he was so far gone. Like, you can tell the difference between his performance from the Koob case to the Overton case. He was present in the Koob case and basically MIA for the Overton case. So Dr. Emmanuel Tenay, the doctor that I was mentioning, he shared this all at the 1991 hearing, also expressed surprise at how Dean had dropped the ball with his own defense. According to Tenay, Dean had undermined his own credibility by not presenting supporting evidence, by calling manslaughter a variety of murder, thus suggesting to the jury that Dean also thought his client was guilty. And, well, it was a contradictory performance to say the least. Mm-hmm. Tenay also noted that Dean should have had outside expert witness for the psychiatric reasons that we mentioned. The psychiatrist could have helped explain things that weren't easily understood and at least given the chance to demonstrate what the effects of crack cocaine were. But it seems that Dean was well aware of what crack cocaine's effects were. Mm-hmm. According to Janice Barnum, the private investigator, she had seen him do substances, both illicit and alcohol, several times. She testified that not only would he take advantage of his law office's close proximity to his bar, helping himself drinking on the job, he would also have drugs delivered to the kitchen and back door. At one point, his girlfriend / the manager of the restaurant found a crack pipe. Mm. Janice said that she discussed it several times with Dean and even arranged for him to go to rehab at least once. Dean, of course, claimed that he didn't have a problem and then, of course, kept changing. Like, I don't have a problem. I only take this much cocaine. Okay, well, I take this much cocaine, actually. Well, actually, I take this much cocaine. And also, this is something that I didn't get into in depth because, unfortunately, I just didn't know where to put it, but the dude had a tarantula. I feel like, at least in the 80s, if you have a tarantula, there is some illicit substances involved in that decision-making.
Yeah, probably.
It just also screams midlife crisis.
Considering the fact that he got divorced in, like, 1986. Yeah.
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 Not illegal, though.
Not illegal.
No.
Not illegal, just very weird. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember what he named his tarantula, but apparently it was a girl. Mm. Despite going to rehab in 1988, he quickly relapsed. And again, kept insisting he didn't have a problem. He had a problem. So by the time he was representing Overton, Barnum testified, Dean had deteriorated both physically and mentally. He was often a no-show to the office, to the point of canceling appointments with clients and displaying extreme forgetfulness, especially short-term memory. Like, they would be having a conversation, the phone would ring, she would step out to grab a file that they had just been talking about. When she gets back in, he has no idea what the file is or why she's giving it to him. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, he lost quite a bit of weight, as well as the color to his complexion, with his skin practically gray as his hands shook almost constantly. When he would buy cocaine, it was always with checks for $40, about $100 now. So he was getting about $100 worth of cocaine every time he would go get cocaine.
And he was paying in checks?
Apparently so.
Okay.
I'm not saying...
He's a lawyer. They knew he was good for it.
Right. I was going to say...
It's not like the check's going to bounce.
It's funny you say that, but we'll get to why that's funny.
So I have a video here of Dean in 1993 if you'd like to see it.
That's so weird.
Well, his court-appointed attorney is a former member of the St. Clair County Prosecutor's Office.
He was a prosecutor for St. Clair County, which I was never told. And he had been prosecuted for drug use in 1983 in Ohio.
He's had drug convictions. He's been housed in rehabilitation centers.
He had other drug charges during that period also and was on drug probation at the time that I met him.
I believe that there wasn't one stone unturned, one legal issue that came up in that trial that I wasn't prepared to argue legally and hadn't researched. I wasn't surprised at all.
He's had a number of clients that he represented who were found guilty that had their court case reversed because of inadequate representation.
I don't care what people say or their opinions.
The ineffective assistance of counsel, I think, in this case, goes deeper than what you can see on the record. The fact, for example, that this defense lawyer had also been the lawyer for the chief investigating police officer some time before this case, which would give him sort of a classic conflict of interest.
He's best friends with everybody in the court, and he has to endear himself to these people. This is where he lives and works, and he was not going to rock the boat for anybody, especially me.
When we have defense lawyers that are totally incompetent or underfunded, who do terrible jobs, the courts are ready to sanction that. Nothing guarantees the conviction of an innocent person faster than a lawyer that's not up to the job.
In this case, the lawyer was hired by the defendant or retained by the defendant before he was appointed by the court. His name was given to the defendant by the sheriff in the jail. Here's a good lawyer, you ought to get this guy. Then he goes to the judge, I got this case, will you appoint me to represent him? It's a very bad process, a very bad system.
We now know, and I think it's a matter of public record, that the defense attorney in this case has been suspended from the practice of law. At the time of this trial, apparently he had a serious substance abuse problem.
This trial really got to me. I spent a lot of time, a lot of work. I was crossed between innocence and guilt.
He owned a bar called Wall Street in Port Huron, and he would visit me drunk. And all the time. I mean, just out of his mind. His eyes were glazed. He was always high.
I'm not so sure this wasn't the reason for it. I mean, I had a breakdown after that.
He told me he was having heart problems. And then I asked him, what's the cause of these heart problems? He said, we're just partying too hard. That's what it came down to. He didn't really discuss the cocaine personally, but then later on, he made it clear that he did use drugs. And I have a big ethical problem with drug use, of course, which a lot of my witnesses testified about. I'm very anti-drug. I always have been.
They can't cross-examine people. They can't do an investigation. That's why these bad crime labs, where there's been outright fraud, existed for years, because the defense lawyers, were not trying to seek the underlying data, not getting experts, not up to the job, not smelling a rat when there was one obviously in the room.
One of the things that we often see with lawyers who have substance abuse problems, who keep trying to do their jobs, is they lose attention to detail.
He had an assistant, Jan Barnum, who did a lot of work in the case. She did an incredible amount of work, and 90% of the good things that she did, he didn't use either. She framed incredible questions, like you're asking me now, and for the courtroom, and he never used any of them.
Now, does that mean he's entitled to a new trial because his attorney was on drugs or was drunk? No. Sometimes attorneys who are extremely drunk can do a pretty good job. The real issue is, as a result of what his attorney did or did not do, was he denied a fair trial? Was he denied the right to have, his absolute right to have the jury consider all the evidence in his favor? And I don't think they did. I don't think the jury got to hear all the evidence in his favor. And that bothers me. It bothers me because it leads to the very real possibility that he didn't commit this crime.
There's another concern for the appeal. During the trial, Attorney Dean appeared to be struggling with substance abuse.
It's unfair because it had nothing to do with that trial. And I don't know if anyone would indicate that it did, because it did not. I'm not so sure this wasn't the reason for it. I mean, I had a breakdown after that. I mean, this trial really got to me.
So that's him claiming that he's addicted to coke because of the
Fred Freeman trial.
But he had already been arrested for it prior to that.
Yes.
And he had also been checked into rehab in 1988.
Yeah, that would have been after the Freeman trial, though.
Okay, so that kind of lines up.
Yeah.
Right, but at the same time, like everything else, especially since he's like, 1983, when I left the prosecution. Yeah. So Janice attested to preparing the Overton case almost single-handedly, with Dean not meeting with Overton face-to-face, except for when they were in court together. Though Dean was talented in the courtroom, no matter the talent, preparation in a court case is always key. Several witnesses agreed during testimony, noting mistakes that would have been prevented if Dean had done his due diligence. So this is specific to Dean, not related to the case, but in addition to another hospitalization in 1990, Janice informed the court that Dean was on the radar of the police, as she had attempted to scare Dean away from buying drugs by informing on his dealers. So remember,
John Bounds.
Yeah. Janice actually reported to him first of Dean's drug problems. Like, so former client gets told, hey, your former lawyer has a drug problem. Can you take care of these guys? And she gets pushed over to Ron Smith, the lieutenant for the drug task force. Lieutenant Ron Smith is actually the guy who was investigated for possible embezzlement from the St. Clair County Drug Task Force back when they weren't auditing their books. So we're in the company of some very trustworthy people right now.
Right. And the people who she's going to for help, aren't exactly being helpful.
Right. Especially because, like, what were you going to say? So sorry.
The solution was to just arrest the drug dealer, so
and
then he
not
couldn't.
him.
Right.
That was her solution.
Right.
Which I get it. Like, you don't want to get your boss in trouble, especially if he's your friend or whatever they had going on. But
he's still going to find a way to get drugs. Right. Yeah.
And she basically admitted that on the stand. Like,
she may have seen it as a way to, like, inadvertently get him in trouble without having a direct hand in it. You know? Maybe thinking that it would trace it back to him.
I think so, yes. But at the same time, she also definitely admitted, like, yeah, no, I tried, but he kept finding drugs.
Yeah.
Obviously, this did not work with then Lieutenant Ron Smith of the Drug Task Force admitting at the appeal trial that the task force was aware of Dean, including several buys in the immediate months leading up to the 1991 appeal hearing. He was first officially tipped off about Dean in February 1989, and though Dean had been seen at crack houses during 1989, Smith seemed to insist that he was not aware of Dean ever visiting a crack house from August to December 1989, which was when Overton's trial was. So they were like, oh, yeah, no, we saw him at the crack house in 1989, except for August through December. And it's like, we know.
Who was it that said that?
Lieutenant Ron Smith.
Uh-huh.
And so you can see why I'm like, because Dean had other cases that were going on.
Yeah.
If anything,
would get all screwed up if it came out that the attorney was on drugs.
Yeah.
Did this kind of kick off like a ton of appeals for people that were represented by Dean? Or
it should have.
Yeah, but not really.
Not really, no.
The only big one was Overton.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the only one I'm aware of.
Freeman, has he gotten an appeal? Or
So he exhausted his appeals with information. Not all the information had come to light at the time.
About Dean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and like as more information would come out, rather than kind of sit and wait and gather everything, his attorneys would file an appeal.
Right.
So he exhausted his appeals. So in 2013,
I think that's right.
He filed a habeas in federal court and was granted it by a federal judge. And the primary reason was because of the Overton case getting overturned, as that being a precedent for ineffective counsel. That in itself was overturned by a federal appeals court, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to describe it. It's a mess. So, despite no direct connection to Dean and crack cocaine during the trial, at least according to the Drug Task Force, the appeal was granted, with Overton ultimately accepting a plea deal for second-degree murder. Still, despite that righting of the wrong, it still wasn't enough for some, with Overton's mother, Jan Bohr, ultimately submitting a complaint to the Michigan Attorney Discipline Board. A subsequent investigation revealed that not only had Dean been using cocaine, doing so at least 19 times between July and September 1990, but he had lied about it, denying all accusations in a 1991 statement to the Discipline Board. This was even after he had been arrested for and pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor related to cocaine, having been caught by the Port Huron police with it in his system in September 1990. Like, they saw him buy the drug, and I don't know how he did it, but like literally in the time between them seeing him buy the drug and them catching him, the drug was no longer physically present, but when they did a drug test, it was in his system.
Wow.
So how much cocaine was it though that it was? presumably $100.
It was his $100.
I mean,
it was his $100 fill up.
That's not going to kill you if you do it all at once, but it sure is going to like.
Oh, he was Wolf of Wall Street in that crap.
Yeah, like between them catching him and seeing him buy it, he probably just ate it all, or
yeah. It's again, they did not make it clear how long it took, and like. Because it may have been like, oh, we saw him, but he got into a car, so we have to follow him in a car, and so
could have
like
been a couple hours even.
Right, but they made it sound as if it was like within minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
it could have been.
So it's like, David, where did the cocaine go?
I'd be interested in seeing like how much was in his blood,
system.
like in his system. Maybe he like dumped it out the window if he knew he was being tailed or something, and just was already high from.
That could be it, but at the same time, I feel like Dean, with where he was at in his cocaine addiction, and
yeah, you're right.
He's not going to dump it out.
I was going to say nobody's going to dump that out if they're addicted that hard.
Did they offer? I'm probably focusing on this too much, but did they offer any like indication as to if he knew he was being tailed before they got him?
Not.
Or was it just him casually like, okay, here it is, and taking the coke?
Essentially, like,
see, I'm like picturing him panicking.
I don't think he knew that he was being tailed, because it sounded as
kind of the point.
I was going to say, it sounded like a stakeout kind of situation.
Yeah. Okay.
Which, of course, it was the Port Huron police who did it, which is kind of funny, but also like.
So this wasn't the drug task force.
No, it was the Port Huron police.
But they were at this point. The drug task force was also
aware,
watching him.
But didn't, arrest.
And he's still practicing law.
Right. Okay.
It's depressing. So the misdemeanor was for him small potatoes because it resulted in 6 months of probation, $500 in fines, and 100 hours of community service doing wills for senior citizens. Which, again, a bit of me is like, I don't know why you would put this man in charge of any person's will or trust arrangements, but...
Yeah, he's proven himself to be relatively dishonest.
It's just more work for Janice.
Yeah, that's it.
You're right. That punishment was actually for Janice.
Yeah.
Peter Deegan was like, you know what? I got something for you. Oh,
she
man.
just had a stamp, like my notary stamp, but it was just like his signature.
Honestly, probably yes. If not, like having her sign for him
or
just
that.
All the time.
Yeah.
So even though the conviction was wiped clean, there was still a 60-day suspension that the discipline board gave him. So that was still on his record. He would be allowed to resume practice so long as he is submitted to random drug tests, counseling, and supervision by another lawyer for at least 2 years. Rather than take responsibility, Dean claimed that Overton has sabotaged his own case and that Overton's mother was going to have to face reality like I have. That is a direct quote.
I think we see that in like that clip I showed you too, where he cannot take responsibility.
It didn't affect the case whatsoever. Yes, it did, dude.
Well, he just can't admit.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, well, actually, it was the defendant's fault that I got drugs.
Addicted. Yeah. Yeah, he seemed to ignore the fact that the reality she was facing was that the lawyer who represented her son and failed to properly do so was let off the hook with a smack on the wrist. David Dean got 60 days, she said to the newspaper. Randy Overton gets life with no parole. This was before the appeal went through. She also criticized the legal community for shielding their own, with a noted that Kenneth Lord, the prosecutor who tried Overton's case, was Dean's lawyer when Dean was convicted in 1990.
Say that one more time.
So Randy Overton's case was tried by Kenneth Lord when David Dean had his conviction for the cocaine. Kenneth Lord had transitioned into private practice by then, apparently, and took on the defense of his former rival, as it were.
Wow. Kenneth Lord pops up quite a bit, too.
Yes, I was going to say, again, the people that we have to do episodes on.
So what I was just showing Mike was the attorney discipline board suspensions.
I was going to say, we'll be going through those really quick.
I was going to say, I thought that the packet was going to be pertaining to just the one.
No.
But as I flipped through it, I see there's a bunch of them.
I was going to say, yeah, we're going to be going through all of them.
It spanned many years.
Yeah, I was going to say, I get into it. Don't you worry. It might have been comforting in some ways to realize that karma, or maybe Dean's own incompetence, would come back to haunt him. Even as he was reinstated by the board to his practice, he was admonished in 1994 and 1997 before being suspended in July 1997 for 30 days after trying to file something with a bad check. He wrote the check, knew he did not have the funds in his bank account, but still wrote the check and sent it, which is part of the reason why I'm
so he wasn't good for it.
No.
Right. And he was doing this with court stuff that he had to file?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Which again, why? So he was suspended in 1998 for failing to file responses in a bankruptcy case. It's one of those things of he could have either filed the answers or he could have told his client hey, I am not available to actually do this, get other counsel. He did not provide effective counsel in a bankruptcy proceeding, and so he was suspended in 1998 for that. Later that same year, he was suspended again. Both of these times were for 6 months. So in 1998, he was suspended for a full year, essentially, because he continued to practice law while he was suspended in 1997. And he didn't tell his client, hey, I've been suspended, find somebody else.
Right.
Yeah, so these two suspensions were back-to-back 6-month suspensions with certain conditions, including counseling, needing to be met. When he was suspended in February 1999 for 18 months, he had not been reinstated from the prior 2 suspensions. He was being suspended again for being retained and paid by a client, despite Dean knowing he was suspended, and again, not informing his client of that.
It's incredible to me that in what profession do you get that many chances?
Right.
Apparently law.
Yeah, apparently.
Which you would think would be one of the last ones that you would.
So, again, 18 months. Still hasn't been reinstated from the 6 months. Heck, hasn't technically been reinstated from the 1997 suspension. So in September 2000, he filed to be reinstated to his practice, and a St. Clair County board approved him to be recommended for reinstatement. So before the discipline board got it, basically his fellow lawyers in St. Clair County were like, yeah, he should totally have his license. He should be recertified.
So at this point, does he still have the drug problem, or because these suspensions aren't necessarily related to drugs?
Not necessarily, but
kind of.
On paper, there's no indication that he still had a drug problem by this point.
But he's still having problems, for sure.
You could assume that the drugs are causing some of these
problems are indicative of drug use.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Because this is a long time to be doing cocaine.
It is. I was gonna
probably
say,
really affecting his health.
I was gonna say, if he isn't still doing cocaine, it's only because of the fact that it has wrecked him completely. So when he filed to be reinstated, he hadn't paid the almost $3,200 in fees and costs from his prior 3 suspensions.
Well, yeah, they wouldn't let him work.
So
how's he supposed to make any money?
Initially they were going to be no, you have to pay it all up front, but then they let him do a payment plan. Mm-hmm. To him, he must have seemed close to getting back to work, having former clients, coworkers, even his oldest son testify on his behalf to the board that he had changed. Though he claimed to the Times-Herald he had been using cocaine since 1983, to the board he claimed he had taken cocaine for only 1.5 years from 1988 to 1991 due to personal and financial problems, which
financial problems. Then you do one of the most expensive drugs?
Thank you for saying what I was thinking, because I was because nothing says I have a financial problem like spending my money on cocaine.
Yeah.
Right.
That is the financial problem.
He also admitted to doing cocaine for the time when they knew for a fact that he was doing it.
Yes.
When he was being watched by the Drug Task Force.
Yes. Even though initially back in 1991 he tried to lie in a statement to the board.
Right.
Well, he admitted to the Times-Herald to doing it even prior to that.
I know.
Right.
Which is part of the reason why I was bruh.
Yeah.
So, despite his attempt at redemption, he was shot down, with the discipline board revealing that Dean had never submitted to random drug tests, never submitted the monthly progress reports, and never gone to AA, which he had initially agreed to. These were all things that he had agreed to when he was suspended to get his stuff back. Those were the conditions that he had to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Though the board acknowledged that some of these requirements may have been pointless, it wasn't up to Dean to unilaterally decide which rules he would or wouldn't follow. Partially for this reason, his petition was rejected, with one board member noting that Dean, quote, did not and could not establish compliance in his career, evidenced especially by Dean attempting to still play lawyer while suspended. Dean did concede that he did not complete training nor attend AA meetings, even after he asked for an extra week to find his records for those AA meetings. Those records never materialized, to be clear. He asked for an extra week and then he never provided them.
Yeah.
Even worse, he conceded that it wasn't until 2001 that he fully complied with the 1997 suspension. Attorneys who do not practice law for 3 years due to suspension or just personal reasons, they must be recertified to go on practicing law. Because he was still suspended and because it had been 3 years, they chose not to recertify him on top of keeping him suspended. The board had a really, really good quote for this. Like, petitioner cannot seriously be arguing that he should escape the recertification requirement because he did in fact practice law in February 1998, albeit in direct violation of a suspension order. So he was trying to say, like, no, I should still be, like, certified because I worked in 1998.
Right.
And that was still 3 years ago in 2001.
But he wasn't supposed to be working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We must construe the MCR 9.123C to refer only to the authorized practice of law during the rule of 3 years or more following a suspension or disbarment. A construction of that rule, which would allow an attorney to avoid recertification by practicing law in violation of a discipline order, would be repugnant.
That's a good word.
It's such a good word. With his law career seemingly done in Michigan, Dean retreated to Florida, resuming his teaching in Martin County, and even winning Teacher of the Year in 2000. It was either 2006 or 2008.
Sorry, this was Dean?
Dean.
He had a redemption arc as a teacher, kind of. Sorry, I was looking at the discipline board thing.
I was going to say, just wait.
It just kind of sticks out. When he was suspended in 1997, the check that bounced basically was in the amount of $25. Yeah. So he was down bad at that point.
Financial issues, as he said.
Yeah. Wow.
Buy an 8-ball instead of making sure your court checks don't bounce.
Dang. I hope to never know what that life is like.
Yeah, it's got to be rough.
Initially, it looked like Dean was going to have a small redemption story because, like, he basically moved down to Florida with his family. He was with his grandkids. Like, he was Teacher of the Year, either 2006 or 2008. And then, despite this seemingly successful return to teaching middle school, soon enough, Dean was in trouble again, being accused in 2012 by 2 students of inappropriate conduct.
Oh, no.
This led to a 7-month investigation where it was found that the now 60-something had friended many underage students on social media. And the school that he worked at had the policy of, like,
don't do that.
Obviously don't do that, but also, like, you need express permission / a darn good reason to be friending them on Facebook.
Like it's a group for the quiz bowl or something.
Right. But no, he was literally just
liking pictures,
friending all of his, usually the girls and stuff like that. And the girls were like, yeah, he wanted us to sit on his lap and everything like that.
See, that's a little bit worse than,
And that is part of the reason why
it gives new light on the Jan.
When I look back at the Jan thing and at her age, I have to wonder. So the investigation was closed because Dean retired.
Right.
And he insisted on his innocence, saying, you don't just turn into a pedophile at age 65. And which
That's
is part
such a wild quote.
Which is part of the reason why another reason why I'm like suspicious of the whole Jan thing, because it's like,
Right,
no, you
well,
don't
'cause
turn into a pedophile at age 65. So when did you turn into a pedophile, Dean?
Right, he's kind of telling on himself accidentally.
Accidentally.
Well, I would hope he didn't do it on purpose.
I was going to say, it seems almost intentional, at least like
Right.
he intended to say that. Whether or not he intended to tell on himself is true.
Yeah.
An accident. Still, the Florida Department of Education barred him from reapplying for a teaching license in 2015.
It's fair.
It's unclear why specifically Cambodia, but after the school scandal in Florida, Cambodia is where Dean settled down, and he ended up serving as an assistant principal at like an international school there until his death in 2018 at age 71.
Wow.
There are still other stories, other details that would better complete the picture of David Dean. Indeed, this was a rushed script, not for lack of detail, but for lack of patience and sympathy for the subject. There is a case I may cover later on, separate from the series, that will heavily feature Dean, and maybe one of my co-hosts will find another story touched by Dean's influence, but for now, this finishes our tale on David Dean.
I think you did a great job considering
how much stuff
how much there is to go into. I mean, you're just skimming the surface, but that's literally all you could do without...
Right. Without completely sounding tinfoil hattish and or losing everybody.
Yeah.
Or
making it a series.
Right, that too. I was going to say, like, it's one thing for the Michigan murder series to be a series.
Right.
It's another thing for just David Dean to be a series. Although, again, people are definitely, they contain multitudes. So if there ever was a guy who would qualify, it would probably be him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what do you think?
I don't know. It, like a lot of these stories that we talk about on this show, it's, you can kind of see the way he was in his early life and how it's pretty disappointing to see how it winds up, obviously.
Yeah.
Because he was a very talented lawyer, and the stuff at the end with the kids, that's a little a little concerning, obviously. But it seemed like at the early stages of his life, he was good at what he did, and you know how quickly things can turn.
Yeah.
Don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs.
The moral of the story.
Yeah. But I'm also kind of surprised that outside of the Overton case, there weren't a ton of appeals.
No. I was going to say there was maybe like one other appeal.
Right. Because you would imagine that anybody that was represented by him from... Well, if you want to argue 1983, I mean...
Right.
Because... Or from 1988 to 1991, you would think anybody that was represented by him would have grounds for a retrial.
There might be that we're not aware of.
Right.
We know that
also
the Fred Freeman case was unsuccessful appeals, but those are the only ones I know of.
And also it comes back to like, are the people aware that they can appeal?
Right.
Because like there's some times where it's like, I don't know if there's a time limit for appeals.
Sometimes you can appeal.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely frustrating because it's like there are probably, if there's only 2 that we know of, I feel like I could safely say that there are 7 more out there at the very least.
Yeah.
And that is me being conservative in naivety, and also just hearing a few cases. You almost hope that these were like outliers and not the rule.
Right.
But unfortunately, especially with how far gone he seemed to have been at the height of his problem, it seems to have been the rule and not the exception.
Well, because you could also say that he was so good at what he did that he probably did get by for quite a while.
Yes.
He probably did perform his job, up to par.
I was going to say, again, like he apparently was 3 years into his cocaine addiction by the time he was doing Coop's case, and he was on fire with Coop.
Right.
Like he apparently was at the top of his game. And I feel like that kind of just plays back into like the life of addiction and stuff like that, because there is a certain point where it's like you're at the highest that you can get, and then things start to kind of slip.
Right.
Well, yeah, and with cocaine, I think eventually you need more and more and more.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's going to have a detrimental effect on
I was going to say, like
your fine motor skills and your memory and stuff like that.
I was going to say, like, literally studies have shown that you need more cocaine to get the same amount of high.
Yeah, like any drug. Like,
yeah.
Did we talk about him drinking at all? Was that anything you came across as him being an alcoholic?
Just from what Jan was talking about, like, primarily that he would take advantage of the fact that his office was on top of a bar.
Right.
So he would go down and, like, fix himself drinks.
Is there somewhere in that, from the Attorney Discipline Board, their ruling when they barred him from his license, where it quotes him as being like very insistent that he did not have a drinking problem?
Yes.
He insists that,
yes,
you know, he admits that he had a cocaine problem, but...
Which is honestly part of the reason why I think he avoided the whole AA thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, because, like, I remember him being like, I don't have a drinking problem because of the fact that he was responding to like the AA suggestion. I'm pretty sure AA is Alcoholics Anonymous, and while people with other addictions can go there and can be helped with that, is it 12-step system?
Something, I don't know.
No matter the addiction, it's supposed to be helpful. So they were like, fine, even if you don't have an alcohol problem, just go.
Right.
Like, it's not that hard. You just have to sit there for an hour and enjoy crappy free coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your feelings once in a while. Like, we're not asking that much of you, man. And still, he couldn't do it.
It's weird to me that it's not the other way around, that he would have been like, okay, yeah, I had a problem with drinking, but no, I didn't do drugs. Why is he admitting to the drugs? And
because,
like, oh, no, I didn't.
Because everybody did drugs back then.
Yeah, right. That's fair.
I was going to say, like, again, he was very much like, yeah, all the legal elites were doing it.
Right.
Like, he didn't name drop anybody, but he was like, yeah, no, I was surrounded by people doing cocaine. Mm-hmm. Cocaine was still kind of considered, like, even though by the 90s they darn well knew how bad cocaine was, in some minds, it was still that white-collar, middle-class, on the weekend drug. So it's okay to admit that you did cocaine. Yeah, so thank you guys for coming with me on this drug-filled, mostly cocaine-filled ride. Thank you for bearing with me through all the twists and turns. And that also goes for you, listeners. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Thumbing Through the Archives. Anything else, guys?
I thought it was really good. I think there, you know, throughout the whole episode, we were talking about things that could potentially be its own episode or own series. I think the most interesting being Dean representing Frederick Freeman and, you know, Temujin Kinzu. I'm hoping that's something that we can discuss more in the future.
Yeah.
Because, you know, after learning more about Dean, it sounds like it was, you know, right in that sweet spot of when he was really
timing was
right. He was really struggling with it, which, you know, backs up the claims of Temujin Kinzu and the stuff that he's going through and trying to overturn. So
I was going to say the Temujin case I would like to get back to at some point.
We will. Yeah.
But
so is this the end of the
of drugs? Yeah.
Okay.
At least I may have like random little spin-offs of the drug series later on, but for the main series, this is it.
It's a good note that ended on.
Yes. Yeah. And on that note, America?
I'm Nick.
And I'm Mike.
And we'll talk to you guys after the break. Bye.
This has been another edition of Thumbing Through the Archives on WMIC 660 AM and 95.3 FM. Catch this episode in podcast form every Thursday after the program on our website at SaniLacBroadcasting.com. Thumbing Through the Archives, produced by Mike Gallagher, Nick Lean, and Erica Frisbee, with assistance from Catherine Connolly.